Hello and welcome to the introductory video for Zap Accounting Software Part A, Positive and Negative Values. You can confirm the file name up here. And on the Home tab of this file, we've got Zap Accounting Software Part A, PN, short for Positive and Negative Values. Zap Accounting Software is simply a collection of Google Sheets that go together to make accounting software. Just like you might have Excel files, templates. We call them templates, but it's just a copy of a file that you make a copy of and use. That's all these are. These were designed in Google Sheets, and they were designed to be used in Google Sheets, but in fact, you could use them in Excel as well. So this video is designed to be a very quick overview of the general file structure of Zap Accounting Software Part A. Zap has three different groups. Part A is the chart of accounts, the checking and credit card ledgers, your reconciliation happens here, transaction reporting happens here, and your income statement happens here. Part B has a balance sheet, so we just keep that in a separate template. Part B is just another file. And then we have various Part Cs, which are supplemental tools for doing bookkeeping and tax accounting. So my goal with this video is to give you a very quick overview of Part A only, such that the subsequent videos on the home page, where we show you what the day-to-day use would be like when you would do a monthly or a quarterly or a semi-annual download of your transactions for your bookkeeping for the month or the quarter or the half of a year. So the goal of this video is, again, just to get you oriented to Part A just enough such that when you see those other videos, you have some idea of what's going on, okay? So the first tab in Zap Accounting Part A is a Home tab. The Home tab, in this case, the parts that we're looking at, think of it as a table of contents. It's just a static list of tabs in the worksheet. So I have a color legend here that corresponds to some of the tabs down here. The bottom line is there's two groups of tabs. We have what we call working tabs, and we have silent tabs. Working tabs are the tabs that you would engage in and use most of the time while using the software. Silent tabs contain information that the software uses. Some of the calculations are done there. Your validation lists are stored there. Copies of the ledgers are stored all the time in date order there. There are also some resources like extra charts of accounts are there. Okay. Second tab in the worksheet is the Notes tab. I'm going to actually condense the header up here. So second tab is a Notes tab. This is just we give you some initial notes about the file and what it is, but you could also keep your own notes here. You can also, because it's a spreadsheet, you could add your own tab and save as many notes or sections as you'd like. The things you might store here would be procedures. You forgot how to do this, or you do this, or this is how you categorize certain transactions, etc. Next tab is the chart of accounts. This chart of accounts is a list of asset, liability, equity, income, and expense accounts, and there are no limitations on it. You make up the account names, you make up the account types. That's it. It has an additional section here. It's an add-on for budgeting. There's some budgeting functionality built in, which we won't go into at all here. The next tab is ZIDS. ZIDS is a generic word for project, property, client, etc. So various people are going to be using this for various uses. And instead of trying to create a label that was specific to project, property, or client, we chose the word ZID. So in other words, if you have a transaction, you're going to be able to assign it as an expense, an office expense, but maybe you want it to also attach that to client Bob Jones. There's a column in our ledger to do that. You'll see that coming up. The next tab is the Statements tab, probably the most powerful and the most complex tab in the worksheet. What we have is we have our checking account here. Down below, we have our credit card, and if you have more than just one working checking account, one credit card, you basically copy this entire block of information in the setup and you add it down here. Most recently, I worked with somebody that had about 3 or 4 checking accounts and 4 credit cards, and they all expand and contract nice and neat, so something like that. What we basically have here is a place for you to track your header information for your statements. So, for example, here's a start date and end date, a starting balance, increases, decreases, and an ending balance. What we then do with that is the first column here, if there is an error, will be green if there is not an error. So when there's an error, you can see it's gray. So once you get it right, what this does is just confirms that you typed in the information from the statement correctly. There's an equation. This is a function of this plus this minus this. So we confirm, first of all, that you've typed it in correctly. The second column is the most powerful column. With this column, we actually cross-reference this balance on this date, and if the balance is that equal to that on that date, the number shows up here and it turns green. So what we do here is we use an aggregated reconciliation process. It's far different than any reconciliation process you might be familiar with QuickBooks or Quicken. We don't reconcile item by item. We do aggregated reconciliation on a running balance basis. To do this, you will need to use the dates on your statements for your transactions. Now I'm going to move quickly through the rest of these tabs because you're going to see this coming up. What we have is we have two transactions called Raw Transactions tab. For every account you're going to track, for your checking account and for a credit card, we have a place where you're going to paste in your transactions. We expect most people to download their transactions from their banking institution, and you download them in a CSV file or an Excel file, and then you're going to take and copy and paste those transactions into a Raw Transactions tab, say right here. When you do that, the spreadsheet, this software, the spreadsheet, will map your data into the format that we need for the ledger. You'll paste it in here. It will map it over here. And then you'll manually take and grab this information. You'll highlight it. You'll hit Control-C, and you'll go over into your ledger and you'll paste it. So we have a Raw Transactions tab for checking, a Raw Transactions tab for credit card. Here is the checking ledger. So I would actually take that formatted information, I would paste it in here, and then I would assign accounts to it. And then if you were tracking ZIDs, you can expand this column. You can assign a ZID to it, and there's a place for comments. And you can see the running balance over here. This is what we use to reconcile. Okay. So we have a Statements tab, has all the information, the header information of the statement. Then you go get your raw transaction information from your bank. You manually download it. You manually cut and paste it in here. It maps it over to here. Then you manually paste it over into the ledger itself. You assign categories, and you're done. Now, it sounds like a lot of steps. Once you get used to it, that whole process, the downloading and importing, manual importing, and getting over to categorization could take as little as 60 to 90 seconds. Okay. The next ledger, we do have a ledger for other expenses. Other expenses are for things like if you pay for a taxi cab in cash, you can actually enter that value here, and it will be included in your income statement. We basically treat it as a faux credit card. You could also present your company with expense reports and then write yourself checks against those. That's another way to do that. Now, once all your transactions are in here, we have two reports that are relevant. The first is a transaction search. You can see this operates much like a database, more like a database interface. Okay. And then what we have is we have an income statement. This income statement is auto-generated based on the information in your chart of accounts. You do not have to do any configuration to get this income statement to work. We do have additional income statements that have a little bit more complex equations built in. They work a little bit more like spreadsheets in that the equations are in the cells, as opposed to some of our automated stuff. The equations are in header rows that are red that help prevent users from messing up their worksheets. If you do ever mess these up, you're going to be instructed to download the file, save a copy of the original, and then use a custom file for yourself. And if you were to ever mess up a cell, you would just go back to the original that you downloaded and look at the equation and copy it in. There is a balance sheet prep report here. So basically you can pick an account and a date and get the values that you'd need to fill in your balance sheet. Your balance sheet is in a separate file. There's a non-income and expense transactions report. This is very useful if you're having problems reconciling or if your balance sheet isn't balancing. This is a tool that will be used for that. Budget versus actuals related to the budgeting module. Okay, and that wraps up the working tabs in this. We have silent tabs, as I mentioned. In this case, this is where a lot of the lists for the drop-down boxes are all stored here. Transaction aggregator is where all the math for the accounting software is. It's where all the accounting magic happens. So for those that are interested in trying to figure out how this works, it's really all contained on this tab where the bulk of it is. We have a mirrored checking account, a mirrored credit card. We always keep copies of the ledgers in date order. We need that for the statement reconciliation page. And it also helps a little bit for the reporting too, to always have a copy of the data in date order. So you always have to have a mirrored tab for every active tab, for every active account you have. So for each account, you would have a raw transactions tab, you would have a ledger, and then you would have a mirrored ledger. The last tab in here is a chart of accounts lists. In other words, the file is set up by default for a Schedule C, but we've given you some charts of accounts for, let's say, an S corporation or Schedule E. So if you want to use this chart of accounts, you literally just copy it and paste it over the other, and away you go. So hopefully this has been a good introduction to Zap Accounting Software Part A, positive and negative values. We do have a copy of the software that's identical to this, that instead of being positive and negative values is actually debits and credits. The primary difference there, the only difference, is that on these tabs here, instead of having a single column that has an amount where positive and negative values are used, there are two columns that are debit and credit. So again, this isn't designed for you to be able to understand everything about this software, how it works. It's a quick overview, a good overview, such that then you can move on to our shorter videos that show you what Part A looks like in daily use when it comes to doing your bookkeeping and your tax accounting.